She's working at Zalando and has been doing lots and lots of conferences recently. She will show us how to do better tracking and by using examples taken from her app, her Zalando app. So please welcome Kate.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me well? Yes, cool. Okay, so my first question, do you know what is tracking? No, okay, one guy knows. Okay, then who uses tracking in their app? Okay, and who heard anything about tracking on any conference? Okay, one guy, you've been on a previous conference where I spoke. Good. Who thinks it's interesting to know? Okay, the one who didn't raise their hand just can leave the audience, so joking. Okay, so my name is Kateryna Gridina. I work in Zalando. I'm a senior software engineer, and today my topic will be about tracking. Probably one of the most boring topics in the world. So the agenda will be, we will talk about tracking use cases, tracking tools that we use in Zalando, how do we do it, and challenges and best practices that we figured out. So, what is tracking? I didn't find anything about tracking in the Google, so I invent my own definition of it. You can read it later on, but yeah, it's just about it. So we have different tasks. We measure, we recommend, we improve, and we test with help of tracking. And this is very important to have it in our application, and somehow it's kind of a little bit underestimated that we have tracking and we don't have, and everyone feels so annoyed to implement it, like, tracking again, oh my God. And I talked to one guy and he said, yeah, my client wants tracking everywhere. It's like so annoying. Yeah, so in our application, we use several tools. We use Google Analytics, we use Xengage, Adjust, Optimize, and AppDynamics. And lately, we use also Crashlytics, Fabric. So we have so many things to track. And we always constantly pollute in our code. And we're thinking, okay, what can be the best solution for that? So now we have a current implementation for that. I know that a lot of people have the same use cases that they need to track a lot of system and send a lot of different events. So in our system that we built, we don't have to actually care about this so much. So we have an application and we have tracking config, which decides if we need to track event or not. Why we need this config? It's because of GDPR, we need to filter out events that cannot be tracked. Let's say if it contains some personal user information or maybe some user data, we shouldn't send this event. In the tracking config, we specify that. Then we have a tracking service which create actual event, but not necessary. It's just the data that the event needs. Then we have a tracking handler. And here the whole job is done. So basically, tracking handler decides which event should be sent to which system. And make this event, then send it to the proper API. This way, we reduce the code pollution in our application. So we just need to trigger event once. So what are the pros? We have full control over data. It's very easy to add more events to our application because we are developers and we can do this. And backend is not involved. So we can do this totally on our application. And what is cons? It's very low flexibility because we should, every time we should release a new application if we want to add something or if we want to adjust something. We pollute our code because we have a lot of events, they're everywhere, and if you know how to implement it, you know that this is a little bit painful to see where it was called and how to test it actually. And we do a lot of extra calls because we need to actually call different systems, right? Xengage, Optimize, Google Analytics, and so on. Testing, okay. The one who know tracking, they know that testing can be a little bit like that, you know. It's kind of, you know it's needed, but it's super painful. So you can, okay, I will write this test, well, okay. So we were thinking what we can improve there, how we can make it better. And we actually have kind of video how we did it before. Hey, play. So we open the application, we run the charts, then we see what's the output, then we start to search like in text file, then we try to do some kind of Excel tables where we put our output, then we start to search for different events and output of it. And if we find this parameter, we are happy everything tracked properly. This was not very nice. So we invented rules. Rules, it's an automatic system for testing. How does it work? Diagram is very, descriptive, but I will explain a little bit more about it. So we have application and we have charts. So we have kind of, let's say we want to track view event or flow of different events. How do we make sure that we track it properly? So we run a simple UI test. We record the output of it and we compress it to the HR file. In the same time, we have a JSON with fixtures. We call them fixtures as a kind of rules that we use in order to provide like proper tracking. And we feed it all to the mock server. Mock server has an engine, and then engine compare what we have as an output from the server and the fixtures and realize, okay, this is actually the proper event that we have. So event declaration and event validation are on engine side. It's all inside the application, actually, so it's not on the backend. And we have key values, like rules that we have. For example, we have a key value rule. Let's say that view event should be named by simple string. Then we have validation rule that the string shouldn't be longer or the number shouldn't be more or less than specific number. And then we have regular expressions. Okay. So some code. So how do we do this? We do actual setup. So we have a test, and then we load JSON for this test. We load default values that we want to have in the test, and actual fixtures, so rules that we have. And for every test, we have a separate fixtures. For example, we want to test some flows, like when we open one view, we test view event, then we want to make sure that it's only one tracked, so we also can kind of validate this. Then we run the test, so we open, for example, some category, then we tap on the first item, and we need to assert that actually list click was performed. And then in this assert, we see, okay, we have a tracking log, the actual log that we write everything to log, and then we compare, okay, the one that we have in output should satisfy the rules that we have in catalog click first. And the pictures are looking like that. So we have catalog click first, and we have different events, and then we specify which event should be there, and which parameter should be sent. So we also can specify regular expression, and sometimes we also have kind of default values. So let's say if you know that one event is repetitive and we have some values that you want to extract, we can have kind of, it's kind of inheritance in classes. The same with these pictures. So what's next? We were thinking, okay, this is very nice, we have it on device, but actually we didn't solve like flexibility problem. And we also need to implement this on all devices, on iOS, on Windows, and on Android. What we were thinking about this. So over 90% of tracking can be actually be a backend calls. I know that a lot of people don't have this luxury to have backend tracking, but still we have this idea, so we decided to put some effort in it. So we have an app and we have a backend. So we post every event that happens on device to the event stream. And those events are very simple. For example, just view and ID of the event. And then our system, which is called Kraken, decides this event with this specific ID needs this set of data. And then they start to fetch this data from different services. They enrich this kind of event. They validate if this event actually should happen at this point of time. And they do routing to different systems then. Like Google Analytics, Optimize, Xengage, or something like that. And if something wrong happened, we have alerting and we have an event back in our event stream. So we can read from the stream and say, okay, something went wrong. What is good about it? So it's a lot of flexibility. We reduce responsibility on our side because we don't have to take care about different parameters. We don't have to fetch them. We don't have to do anything, basically. We just send the event, and we don't care afterwards how it was enriched and which parameters did we send. And we don't need to do an extra calls for different services. So we just need to send one event, and backend system will validate this event and then send it to Google Analytics, Xengage, and so on. What is disadvantages? We have less control. So if we want to send extra data, we cannot because backend take over all the control. And backend errors can actually cause the tracking issues and some delays, and some events might not be sent, which is kind of critical for some events, because we know that on backend, like, issues happen quite often rather than on the application. And we still need to specify a lot of extra information if we have kind of events like scrolling, swiping, because backend doesn't know anything about this. Or, for example, we have one interesting use case. We want to see how much time users spend on specific slot in the application. In this case, we need still add extra data in order to provide extra information for that. Actually, I'm fast, good. So, conclusions. Tracking is very important, and correct tracking is even more important. And test automation will save you from this. So please be patient and add tracking testing into your application. And if you're interested about details, just approach me. I hope one day our system will be open source so we can actually share with you. But if you want to implement something like that, I can provide you expertise point of view on this. So, questions? Thank you.
So, thank you.
I just leave this here, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks for your talk. Yeah, I love the subject when you proposed it because, yeah, tracking is always the stuff you have to do because marketing is asking, but no one wants to actually think about that. Neither technical guys, they don't want to think about a nice architecture to simplify the work, and the product guys don't want to help you to actually know what you want to track, and even the marketing at the end of the day, they just forget about that. So after you collect all those data, what kind of tools do you use to analyze that? Do you know?
You mean on the backend side or on our side, on the application?
More for the marketing teams or the BI, depending on who's looking at all these tracking.
Okay, yeah, we have.
Usually the problem is that you collect a lot of data and no one is actually looking at the data for different reasons. No, it's true. And sometimes it's just the tooling.
It's a possibility that you have this data. Yeah, we have a marketing team that take care of this, and they do all the analysis about the data, and then they provide some report. Sometimes when you want to have some information, they can provide special report for you, but it's quite useful. And also, I would disagree that marketing team is mostly interested about it because tracking not only about user features, it's also about performance. For example, we have a lot of tracking on lunchtime or how many minutes the view loading, on how many frames do we have, and so on. So it's also kind of useful for developers sometimes to know what's happening there.
Yeah, sure.
And adding all these automation, did you measure an improvement in the useness of the tracking?
I mean, now development is much faster. I mean, I don't know about performance of the app. Definitely we use less energy, less battery because we send less calls. But for developers it's much easier now. Especially testing is much easier, and we have a lot of fixtures that we can reuse, so we don't have to invent all the time the wheel. So I think it's a very good way of doing tracking and testing.
Once you have collected the data, do you use A/B testing to have a better idea of what's happening with your users, or maybe some feature toggling on something?
In Zalando, we A/B test almost everything. So sometimes we A/B test we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G tests. So this is kind of considered also part of tracking, and sometimes please, Zalando, don't hear me, but actually sometimes we have old feature and we implement new feature, and they want to see the performance of the new feature versus old. And we say, okay, if all this better, do we keep all? They say no. So I was like, okay, but we still do A/B test anyways.
So the tracking part is really important for those kind of apps like Zalando. And how much time as a developer you spend in implemented tracking, like for a given story, a given feature? How much time in proportion you spend on doing tracking, revising tracking, testing tracking?
Is it even significant?
Actually, we don't accept tickets from our product if there is no tracking tickets. I think in our company culture, we have this kind of need to see the information and know that our feature actually perform well. So we're always interested in what's going on. That's why we actually insist to have tracking. And in average, depends on the cases, because sometimes they want to track very complicated tasks. In average, I would say we spend 15% of our time on tracking.
Wow,
oh,
yes.
That's significant. And would you say that now all developers at Zalando are actually in love with tracking? Where did the idea came from? Spending time to improve this field that is always forgotten. Did you came with this idea?
Yes, first of all, we are not in love. That's why we had an idea to improve it, to be a little bit more in love.
To improve the relationship. Sometimes you have to work on it.
Yeah, you have to work, go to psychologist. And so we kind of did it to improve our relationship. So now it's a little bit more easier. And I think the idea came because we had sometimes cases we implement some features and we didn't have enough information to validate if it works well, and sometimes we kind of blind. So we decided, okay, we need this tracking in order to be sure that everything works as we expect.
You spoke about battery, about the fact that you could actually save some battery by doing things server side. Were able to measure that, to measure how much battery you save?
Honestly, we didn't measure, but okay. I assume this because sometimes from one screen we send, let's say, 10 different tracking events, and if we multiply them on 5, we have 50 different calls, and depends also on the timing. If we need to ping antenna or not, we use the battery. But in this case, in the events that we send, we actually can batch them. So sometimes we send only one batch with the events, which is also actually a big improvement.
Okay, I'm thrilled to see that in open source and see how it really works.
Yeah.
So, but thank you very much for
Thank you very
showing
much.
that.
Thank you.
Thanks.